Matthew 27, 57. Now, when Jesus had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of a rock. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. And Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite the tomb. Verse 62. On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember while he was still alive how that deceiver said, After 3 days I will rise. Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people that he has risen from the dead. So the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard, go on your way, make it secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. So that last verse again. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. Right, so 3 significant things here that took place that supports the evidence, as like Wayne was saying, that Jesus actually rose again. It's good news, right? You're going to be rapt about this. I want to have a look at the last verse again, because it's significant ways to prove that Jesus supernaturally did rise from the dead. Turn your neighbour and say, Jesus really did rise from the dead. The first thing we see here is that the tomb was secure. It says that in verse 66. Make the tomb secure. The tomb was secured. They made sure that Jesus was in lockdown, a bit like government. All right, and so, and all this needed to be done for solid documentation for the New Testament. God was kind of behind it. God allowed it to happen. God was kind of like in there. And it needed to be documented in 3 ways. Firstly, there was a large stone in front of the tomb. Now, these stones were not like boulder shaped. You might see some sort of photos with a boulder shaped sort of stone in front of a big tomb. They weren't that kind of a stone. The stones were circle shaped, but they were flat, like a biscuit. Not Tim Tam, but Oreo kind of shape. And what they did, and they would roll that stone in a crevice that was in the ground, and they would roll that so that covered the tomb, and so no one could go in or go out. Now these stones were about anywhere between 1 and 2 ton in weight. What they did is they have it go down on a slope. They'd roll it down on a slope, so it was easy to get it in front of the tomb, but hard work to get it back out. And so Pilate said, make it secure. So that was what they did. So there was no way that even the disciples could have pushed that stone back out, or anyone. That they would have had horses and stuff, a big army to get that thing moved. Secondly, they sealed the tomb. When you first read this, you might sort of think, sealing, means, closing up any of the cracks in the tombs, or silicon gun and no more gaps and seal it up, so that thin people like me couldn't get squeezed their way in there, But it's not the kind of sealing that they were talking about then. The sealing was the Roman stamp, which represented a governing seal that was placed on the tomb. Kind of like, you get you see a crime scene and then the police get their blue and white tape around it, and it's like they seal it and they say, don't touch, don't anyone go near there, it's already, we understand. A bit like that, and what they would do is they would, but like a strap would go across the tomb, and they'd get clay on one side and they'd get clay on the other side, and the straps would connect over the stone, and they would stamp the government seal in the clay before it's set. And so if anyone tried to get into the tomb, it would be disturbed, or the strap would be fallen off. They would recognise that they would know if anyone tried to get into the tomb. So that was part of the sealing. That was the sealing that they were talking about. The Roman seal was actually contributing to God's plan, though. Amazingly, because God wanted Jesus' body to be in there for 3 days. So Pilate and the crew and the band, they were actually working for God, in that God didn't want anyone, getting in there and taking Jesus out before 3 days as well. Because who knows that Jesus also prophesied that he would stay in there for 3 days and 3 nights. Do we know where that might be? Let's have a look. In Matthew 12:40, before Jesus was crucified, he said this. Look at that. Let's give our media team a big clap, can we? So good. Shirley, Leatrice, Ashley there, and all the crew. It says this, Jesus said this, for as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So God knew that Jesus had to be in there for 3 days and 3 nights. And God was kind of in it, the fact that even though the Roman government wanted to make sure that Jesus couldn't get out, God actually wanted him to stay in there for 3 days. And so God was happy about this, I'm sure. Not that God had to be happy about it, but it was just God's plan. And so this government seal was actually supporting the fulfillment of the statement that Jesus made. So scripturally, it was important again that the body of Jesus stayed in the tomb for the period of 3 days. And prophetically, the statement that Jesus made was also a prophetic word that needed to be fulfilled. He needed to be in there for 3 days. Not only that, but the sealing of the stone was actually protecting the disciples as well. Think about this. See, they could not accuse the disciples for stealing Jesus and faking the resurrection because of the government seal that they had placed there over the stone and the tomb. So it's a master plan by God. The government's thinking, they're not allowing the disciples to get him out, making sure. And what the devil meant for bad, God used for good. Amen. And I see this time and time again in our Christian life, amazingly. All the time, I think, what's that comment? Instead of saying, Lord, why is this happening to me? When you believe in God, you turn that around and say, God, why is this happening for me? Instead of to me, it's for me. And if you can believe God that he'll turn a situation around, he will. I know he will. So the stone was actually protecting the disciples as well. And thirdly, they put a guard there to make sure that Jesus stayed in there, even though he was dead. Think about that. They were making sure that Jesus wasn't getting out. And they were making sure that the disciples were not going to steal him and try to fake the resurrection. And as a guard, the punishment back then for falling asleep on duty or leaving your post was the death penalty. And so these guys would not fall asleep unless God would cause them to. Some scholars say that the Roman guard, this guard word here, was not a singular person, but it was a band of men. And they reckon around 16 men made up the guard that Pilate had put around the tomb so that no one could steal Jesus. No one could get in there, and Jesus couldn't get out of there. And so they did this. About 16 men, no doubt they would have been keeping each other awake, slapping each other in the face, don't fall asleep, man, or we're all dead. Because if one of them had fallen asleep and they got caught, all of them would be dead. Cactus, as Wade says. So they would have kept each other awake. They were making sure that Jesus' prophetic words were not going to come to pass, that he was going to get out of there. Now let's go to Matthew 28, verse 1, where he is risen. It says, now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. How would you like to be the other Mary? Oh yeah, this is just the other Mary. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning and his clothing as white as snow. And the guards shook. So we've got guards here, plural. Shook for fear of him and became like dead men. So the guards see this angel, they fear him, they shake, and they become like dead men. So slain in the spirit is what took place there. They are slain in the spirit because of the glory of God. They couldn't handle the presence of God when the angels turned up that time. I mean, if an angel can just kick back a stone, and it's a pretty fearful thing, pretty fearful being. Some angels have been seen as like 13 feet tall and stuff. It's like crazy stuff. Some with wings. And so they were all like dead men, the guards. Then on Easter Monday, the stone was rolled away, which meant a few things. I really like this. Firstly, the Roman seal was broken. The Roman government, the power and authority of the corrupt Roman Empire was broken. Can you imagine the strap that came across as the angels just rolled that stone away, and the clay would have broken up as it pulled away and cracked in half with the signet of the Roman government that had been implanted in the clay, as it would have cracked as the stone was rolled away. It's like God saying, I'm greater than the government. I'm bigger than the government. I'm bigger than lockdown. I'm bigger than anything the government wants to do. Yes, we pray for our governments. But God is your higher authority. God is your higher one you give your allegiance to. We're supposed to obey the law, but we obey God before we obey God, government. And by doing this, the power and authority of the Roman Empire was broken. And the seal was just the strap, as I said, the clay on both ends. The purpose of the stamp was to ward people away from entering tombs, as many as the bodies were wrapped with expensive spices and ointments and other things. And so people would raid tombs because there'd be expensive stuff, ointments, and even possessions. People would, wrap up some of their, possessions, expensive perfumes and stuff. And so people would raid tombs and that, and so that was part of why they did that. So after they put the Roman seal across the stone, it verified that the Roman Empire had decreed to protect it with full force of the Roman Empire law. Anyone trying to move the stone would have broken the seal. Death was the penalty of such a thing. So the tomb in the natural was wrapped up. No one could get in or get out. So the seal that stood for Romans' power and authority had been completely trumped by God's power and authority. Jesus himself rose again. We see God's power and authority coming into play. The devil thought he had a win, but he had a total loss. Next, the tomb wasn't completely empty. The evidence of Jesus' grave clothes were actually left behind in the tomb. And it was also as if Jesus had been lifted right out of them. Like if the body of Jesus had been stolen, it would have been unlikely that they would have taken the time to unclothe Jesus first and neatly lay them out so carefully. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? So the grave clothes were also evidence that Jesus had actually risen from the dead. And next the stone was rolled away. Matthew 28, verse 2. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. And so an angel actually rolled away the stone. The disciples were elsewhere that morning, and the guards would have feared for their lives to attempt such a thing. Besides, it was in their best interest to keep him there in the tomb. However, I don't believe the stone was rolled away so that Jesus could get out. He wouldn't have been thumping his fist on the stone trying to get out. It was just a supernatural thing. He could have actually walked through the stone without angels if he wanted to. It was just that God wanted to do it that way, and God wanted to, I guess, he wanted to show the world through the angel for whatever reasons are up to him, right? The stone wasn't rolled away so that Jesus could get out. It was rolled away so that others could get in to be the eyewitnesses that would declare the testimony from that point forward. Amen. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, whoever that was. Some people say women shouldn't preach the gospel, but they were the first evangelists. Mary went to the tomb. Matthew 28:5. But the angel answered and said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus, whom was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you." So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to bring his disciples word. And as they went to tell his disciples, verse 9, behold, Jesus met them, saying, "Rejoice." So they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." Verse 11, now while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. When they had assembled with the elders and consulted together, They gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, "Tell them, his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept." Blood money. "And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure." So they took the money and did as they were instructed, and this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. Even until today, the Jews that don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, believe that the disciples came and stole Jesus out of the tomb. How about that? Still to this day. And we still see a split in understanding and belief. But he was raised from the dead. Many unbelievers say, well, only the Bible says that Jesus rose again. No. We know from extra-biblical sources say that Jesus actually lived. We know that one of the early claims of Christianity was that he was raised from the dead. And the fact is, for 2,000 years, no one has been able to find his body. No one has found the body of Jesus Christ because it's not here. It's up there. Guys, this is Easter. This is the resurrection. This is why we worship him. You know, in John 3:16 it says, "God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life." You know, that word, those three words, "should not perish," should be concerning for us. What does that mean? There is a hell. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes should not perish but have everlasting life. I won't get Carl to play keys. But you know, or maybe Reway. Has Reway got his axe handy? Where's his? I'll get you to just play a bit of light stuff on the axe. Let's give Reway a big clap. I noticed a few strange chords, but that wasn't you, was it? No, definitely not. Must have been Carla. Amen.